Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and people of all shapes, sizes, and orientations. My name is Jack Holder. I am the editor for Arcane Industries and The Great Commandment, which is live right now. The comics anthology that you definitely want to get in on is live. We are rocking. We are well on our way to $1,500 and 50 backers on our first day. I cannot believe it. But with creators like Story and Sarah, what else could we be doing? So, welcome to a brand new series of interviews between myself and creators and creative teams for the Great Commandment anthology. Now, if you don't know what the Great Commandment is, it is a comics anthology with over 24 creative teams asking what commands mean. Now, we all have commands going on throughout our lives. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union. I, the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt. Go to your room, clean it. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Sacred commands that we all try to adhere to, but you ask yourself what it all means. And so that's what this anthology is all about. A group of creators from all over the world, all walks of life, looking at what drives us to live the way we do and try and form a more beautiful world. Now, today we have two amazing creators, Story Boyle and Sarah Morrison, and I can't possibly do their introductions justice, so I'm going to just shoot it right on off the story. How amazing.
I'm Story Boyle. I am a science fiction and fantasy writer by day, a bookseller by night. Usually I work closing shifts at my bookstore. I also edit. I'm one of the editors at Game Over Books. And I'm in love with words and have been since I was a small child. I also tell people that I'm a natural green. It's because I'm part river troll. Thus the love of bridge architecture and the taste of billy goat.
I'm natural blue, so it's just the way it is.
And I am natural mud. So if we want to go with color, we have to go with the resident artist here, who is showcasing some of her work right behind, Sarah Morrison.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I am a fantasy illustrator. I do book covers, card art, but like all sorts of stuff. So I even do graphic design and tattoo designs and all sorts of stuff. I'm a costumer on the side, so some of you may have seen me at your local convention wearing a large ball gown with LEDs underneath. And I'm here bringing the weird to my city and going around on stilt walks when I'm not painting.
Excellent. So if you didn't hear where we are from, this is, we're starting off straight out of Boston. Each and every one of us have some connection to the jewel of New England. Screw you, Connecticut. I'm sorry, I grew up here. But we all managed to come together at Boscone, which is the residents' sci-fi fantasy book enthusiasts convention. And this is actually where the idea for Stories in Sarah's anthology piece came to life. They met me, they didn't run away screaming, so they decided, hey, let's do this. So let's talk about your piece. It is called The Key, and it is different than everything else in that it is not a comic. It is a mixture of story, essay, personal memoir, and amazing illustrations. So, Story, can you tell us a little bit about Vicky?
Yeah, it's kind of a meditation on the prickly underneath of some particular stories, notably Bluebeard and the Fitcher's Bird, and their connection with the Genesis story, specifically the story of Adam and Eve and the temptation and the eating of the apple, or the eating of the fruit, actually, is because it's never specified in any text as this. This was a cultural phenomenon to depict it as an apple.
Is it ever a vegetable?
Say again?
Is it ever a vegetable?
No.
No.
The word is fruit. It is a fruit.
Fruit.
Although, if you get with New World fruits, I suppose you could represent it as a tomato, but that would be absolutely historically inaccurate.
Because it is supposed to be a tree.
Yes. So there's an aspect of these stories that has like caught me for a long time. Like, I've had a tumultuous relationship with these stories. And the thing is these texts are like, I'm fascinated by them. You know, I studied anthropology of religion, and you know what we create culturally with our folklore and the stories we tell ourselves again and again, and why they last, and what kind of gets under our skin about them is one of the things that's always kind of fascinated me. And with Bluebeard and the Fitcher's Bird, I mean, they're obviously patterned very similarly. You know, you've got this young woman who is sometimes kidnapped, sometimes, you know, betrothed to this fearsome person who is not good in any way, shape, or form, and then is told, here, you can have the keys to the castle. I'm going to go away. You know, this is, you know, tacitly a test of her loyalty. You can go anywhere in the castle, just don't go in this one room. And it's always that forbidden thing that speaks to something uncomfortable underneath it. And it was through my relationship to these other stories, to Bluebeard and the Fitcher's Bird, that I kind of was able to uncover my discomfort with Genesis the way it was told to me. And so, of course, you know, like in the essay itself, like this is my pattern for things. When I'm uncomfortable with something, I don't like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. No, research must be done. I must discover more. Why is this way? Dig, 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 dig. And so, of course, you know, I looked in these representations, you know, and I pay mention to it in the essay, you know, of this search for other representations. And, you know, we've seen them culturally so many times, where you've got the serpent as this hero figure. Instead, I can think of, you know, other comics like Lucifer and so on and so forth that go ahead and take that kind of angle. But there is something in a lot of those texts that also makes me uncomfortable, because it's not discredit, like
It still diminishes the woman in the tale.
Yeah, it still does that, and it still also takes this notion of a text that people find core to their identity as Christians, as Jews. Like, this is an origin story that is important to the Abrahamic faiths in general. And then I started reading various different things, and I've forgotten who it was who put Elaine Pagels in front of me, but I started reading Elaine Pagels, and I started learning about the Gnostic texts and the archaeology behind that. And I was just utterly fascinated, because historically, like, the implications of this is a competing view, a competing Christian ideology at the time that got squashed out in political difficulties with some pretty intense, you know, let's get rid of these problematic ideas kind of thing. They both had a strong foothold at the time. And the way those texts talk about the notion of this forbidden thing, it's not forbidden because by two mortals by God. It was forbidden by jealous older siblings to, like, basically give the light version. And that rings curiously similar to Bluebeard and the Fitcher's Bird. There's pride and jealousy in that ban, and also there's real power in seeing through that and in disobeying it. But it's one of those things that makes you think, well, when you disobey something, there is consequence. You do it with reason. You do it firmly and with thinking about all of the implications.
With intent.
Thank you. That's the word. You say you're not good at the words. I only get away with this because I throw words at it until I come to the right idea and then
only
circle around it.
Brain for the past 6 months.
Sarah, can you talk about that process? Because Story gave the story. I'm sorry, the pun it's hanging right there. It is.
This is why I love my name.
But Sarah, you have some parts of the key right behind you, and very much artists, especially also with comics, often play the role of translator and interpreter for us. So what was bringing the key to life? I mean, we posted a couple of images, but the one, of course, that you seem to love to gravitate back towards is Deliverance. Right there.
Interpretation is yeah, definitely where I was going with this. Story and I have been wanting to collaborate for a while, or maybe more particularly, I have wanted to do something illustrative for one of Story's things. And so this is not the last you've seen of the Story Sarah collaborations. So when what happened at first was, I think I met you, Jack, and you had showed me Why Faith, and I was like, this is great. Like, I'm so glad that this exists. This is fascinating. Like, just the coming together of different interpretations of things, and the way that everyone kind of has their own version, or the way there's so many different versions. I liked that it existed. I think I was, yeah. And you said there was a new one coming up that was going to be very similar, and would I like to be part of it? And then I wandered back by the table when Story happened to be there. Wait, Story, this is our opportunity. We can do this now. And I'm new to being a professional, like, full-time illustrator. So I was, on the hunt for new projects that I could take on that were exciting. And so this kind of fell into my lap during a time that I really needed something. It was great. I had a deadline. I had someone to collaborate with so that I could, it's one thing if you're just doing art for yourself. When you have some other outside input, then you can bounce ideas off of each other and things can grow. And so the fact that I had a project that I could do where Story and I could, I could interpret, what she was writing, it was really what I needed, and was very glad to have that opportunity just present itself so conveniently. And so we sat down. It was in early March or mid-March, and I went over to Story's house. We sat down at the kitchen table and just started figuring out what it was that we wanted to do. Because Story had a little bit of an idea, like you had the kernel there, but you weren't sure what direction you wanted to go in. And I was like, I really don't know what I want to do. I know I want to do something. And so I took that kernel and was like, and so the original concept for this really came about that day. The Story and I were talking about what it needs to have. It needs to have an egg. It needs to have a pomegranate. It needs to have a key. It needs to have fig leaves. It needs to have gold leaf. It needs to have a snake. It needs to have purple satin fabric. Like, these are all the things we knew that this character needed to have. And it grew out of that, which was great.
Wonderful. And I completely agree when it comes to understanding difficult parts of text. Story, when I was still at divinity school, I wrote a mini paper, not for class, literally just for myself, about how Mary Shelley's Frankenstein helped me understand the Tower of Babel so much more.
That is so cool. I want to read something. I'm
No.
bouncing in different directions, even if you're not cool with it. Like, I know. My old papers, I'm embarrassed by but proud of at the same time. That's how these things go.
Well,
Your thinking evolves, but the
exactly.
nuggets.
And why faith in the Great Commandment started out, they came out of my time at BU School of Theology. It came out because I was going through, I was in first semester of my final year, and I was like, okay, what am I going to actually do? I have a master's of divinity almost, specializing in church and the arts. So what I really want to do is make money.
Really?
That is why I went into those particular fields, was for money to go. No, of course not. But I wanted to actually be able to talk, because at that point I was actually going to comics conventions and wearing my cross and showing up, and I was the outlier because I wore very nice sweaters and I had a nice smile and I was like, have a wonderful day, and they're like, who the are you? What is going on here? Where is your nerdy t-shirt? Where are your tattoos? Where is everything? I'm like, but with the comics field, we would always start talking, and of course, because I'm me, we would eventually talk about religion and politics, because like Story, I have no filter. And we would be able to talk about this, and people would be like, well, I don't really talk about religion unless I know the person I'm talking with is safe. And so I went up to the School of Theology going, I have this perfect idea for second semester final project. I am going to do an anthology piece, and it is going to bring together a ton of comics creators, and we're going to have a bunch of different religions being talked about. This is not going to be trying to convert people to Christianity, and we're going to call it Why Faith, and it's going to be amazing. And they responded saying, that's a great idea for you to do on your own time. But I ended up second semester still taking a course on gender and religion in the graphic novel. God works in really mysterious ways. And the professor, who is wonderful, Alexandra Herzog, I will always say thank you and credit you for this. Was like, this is amazing. I'm also really excited because you look like you are very loudly Christian, and you are not trying to convert me. We should do this. But let's talk about that straight up fear that Story and Sarah, you were willing to tackle head on, because when we talk about Christianity and let's talk about feminism, a lot of people's first reaction is, y'all suck. What was tackling? I mean, for those of you who don't know, Genesis 3 is Eve, you done effed up. That is the classic interpretation of, we have this tree, it will give you knowledge of good and evil. Don't eat it. Adam, okay. Eve talks with a serpent. Let's talk about the sexual innuendos right there. She says yes, grabs the fruit, feeds it to her bow, and they are both damned for all eternity. That is the classic interpretation. And you two decided to not turn it on its head, but just start peeling it back. Can you describe the process of that?
It was, yeah, well, it's slow. It comes in pieces. Long before this particular project started, this has been something that's been stuck in my shell like a little grain of sand in an oyster. And it's something I've turned over and turned over again and turned it over again. Like, it's okay. It's heating on both sides here. But it's like with anything you're working on, you need to find the right spot for it. In a lot of my short story writing, a lot of it is, I'll start writing these things which end up being almost prompts or the beginnings of something else, and I excise huge chunks of them and put them in this different piece over here. And oh, I understand now that I've set this down for 5 years, this goes over here. I have it.
On it. It's developing like a pearl.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's if for anybody who's any tech background, any programming background, so my partner and I actually watched this wonderful talk. I've forgotten the name of the big, big name. What he calls it? What was it? Hammock-driven development. There is always part of your brain that even when you are at rest, even when you are doing something else, that's always gnawing on the things that interest you, the problems that are fascinating to you. And so this went through multiple iterations in my head. I initially envisioned it talking about justice and wanted to talk about work in the legal scholar in regard to it. I'm like, no, that's too academic, and I am not as deeply familiar with that as I am the folkloric angle of things. And that's not where I want to go with this, and I don't think it actually fit. Like, trying on these different academic frames to gain entry into this, to pull pieces of it open, to look at the mechanics and underneath of it. And, it's... So for me, it was very much this kind of layered onion process, and then sitting down with so many different Elaine Pagel's books and looking at some of the translations of these Gnostic texts and going over all of my fairy tale books again and again and again. And I have the non-illustrated edition still. So we have copies of the same book. You have the illustrated edition. I let you borrow, Sarah. The classic.
I mentioned off camera earlier. My laptop right now is propped up by one of Story's books that we were using for this project.
And like, you should see the marginalia in this. Like, I've jotted notes, like I'm taking notes for a class. But it came together in fits and starts.
Wait! Did you just admit to writing in a book? I thought I knew you.
All right, you can write in the books, but you don't dog-ear the pages.
There you go.
There are only 3 major sins and 5 minor sins.
Are you writing more commandments right now?
She is writing your commandments right now. Thou shalt not dog-ear the pages. Thou shalt.
That's a minor sin, though. That's a minor sin. The major sins.
There's no death penalty for that one.
Oh no, there's no death penalty for all of them. They just make you a bad person. The real sins are taking espresso in a to-go cup, food waste, and oh gods, now that I'm actually in front of people, I'm like, oh,
I'm trying to now.
Yeah, no, I'm terrible. Nailed that one.
So this creative process has been much different than pretty much any other, because we may have more time, we may have less, but it definitely is a lot more isolated, which for artists could be a blessing. But can you talk about this process? Sarah, you and Story are actually close to each other.
Before we leap into that, I was going to comment on the past topic as well, where so Story. I come at it from a slightly different angle. I just like seeing the connections in things. I kind of left behind spirituality, but I've always enjoyed. I grew up Jewish, and I just always enjoyed a lot of the traditions involved in it, and I liked seeing all the connections for things. But just also just in fairy tales, it's always interesting to see the different versions. Like, oh, this one, even between Bluebeard and the Fitcher's Bird, just how similar they are, but then also how different they are, like, and how things can shift over time, how things evolve. And then I would not have previously read Genesis and made the connection to that story. Oh yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. That is that story just told a different way. And retellings of fairy tales are in some ways very common also in the illustrative world. Like, there's so many children's books out there that are just a different person's retelling of the same tales, but everyone kind of takes in the parts of it that mean something to them and then mash them up and with bits of themselves and put out something that is a little bit different. But in terms of the collaborative process, we do live really close to each other, so it was great to actually sit down in person and hash out the ideas on that first day, because I could be doodling right in my notebook and push it across the table to Story. She could grab a bunch of books off her shelf and open them all. We had, I don't know how many books we had out on the table at that point, just figuring things out.
Just everything open. And I was scurrying upstairs. Let me go to my folklore shelf. Here, I got this one.
And I'm only
you need this fairy tale.
Street, so I could have gone and got more too if I needed to, but.
And the last sin, by the way, Sarah, it's not returning books, not returning borrowed books.
I have lost books, and I've learned, like, I shouldn't lend books that I don't want to get back, but I really haven't learned that lesson, because I still lend books and get angry when I don't get them back.
Some books, they just need to be lent out, and you need to be able to acquire 5 copies of an out-of-print book just so that you can lend them out.
And I have friends who have lending copies of their favorite books so that their copy always stays home.
I've gone to great lengths to return books to exes.
All the books that I have lots of books that I borrowed from friends, but I know who every one of them belongs to, and they will get back to their owner.
Take your time, though.
Do either of you have tips and pointers for fellow artists and writers, especially during this time?
I mean, video chat's great. I mean, we could have done that original visit if, just I could have been drawing pictures and holding them up to the camera, and the fact that I could grab one of Story's books and take it home as reference was convenient, but wasn't necessary.
My bit of advice is break it down to the tiniest steps possible. Itty bitty steps.
This is true even for non-collaborative projects, though.
Oh yeah. But just
bite-sized chunks.
Bite-sized chunks, and make it so that you can finish a chunk every day. Just every day you finish a chunk. It doesn't matter which chunk. You can do it out of order.
Yep.
Just finish a chunk per day.
That one's not tasty, but this one is.
My brain is a mule with this chunk. It will not go for this chunk.
And so this kind of harkens a little bit to a term that I've actually been seeing in particular floating around a little more commonly recently, which is productive procrastination. Because there's the thing that you assign yourself, and then if you can't or don't want to, or for some reason are having a block working on that, and you keep trying to do it and you're not getting through, it's not can't just keep pushing against the wall necessarily and have it work. Sure, maybe you can sometimes, but if you can move to another chunk that maybe it's not as important as that one, but you can still get something done on it, you can still be progressing forward.
That is absolutely true. That's why I'm one of the people that wants to actually keep several projects going on at the same time.
I love having multiple projects going at the same time. I mean, I work in oil paint, so when one painting is still wet, I can't work on it. I have to go work on another painting. If I keep working on that one, I'll just screw it up because the paint is still wet. So yeah, multiple projects has been really, really good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Especially like with me also, like there's, I know my crutch words, everything's like something else. No, but the interesting thing is there's also in the writing process, especially if you've got somebody to help you look things over or edit things, their reading of a thing takes time and you can't change it on them while they're reading it. So that's the paint drying process in the writing phase of things. You can use that to work on different steps, different bits, different projects.
And then collaborations or even just having somebody to bounce ideas off of is really important in general. You can't just work in a bubble because you need some outside input to improve. And there's things that you just don't see if somebody else looks at it and they're like, oh wait, did you realize that this looks like this? Oh no, I didn't realize that. I should maybe change that if I don't want that. But because of being in quarantine right now, it's easy to just kind of hide in your shell and not really try to collaborate. So the collaboration was great. It meant it was a forced way of being able to bounce ideas back and forth off of each other. And even if it wasn't like we didn't always reply. Like sometimes a story would send me a draft, or I'd send her a in process painting, and just knowing that she got to see that, and that if something stood out and was like, oh, you should fix that, she probably would have told me. So clearly it's looking all right. All right,
Also the moments like the email comes and I don't have the spoons to reply to this for 3 days.
Which is fine. But that's the other thing is having the, if we were in person, we'd have to reply right away, So being able to have that time to focus your thoughts and figure out what you want to say, it's great because then you're mulling over that email for 3 days. Or maybe one of us is being a slacker and then getting that email is just like, oh, right, I got to work on the thing. All right. Oh, getting this email excites me. Now I have increased boost.
We need to get back to some sort of like letter writing, almost like.
Yeah, I've been doing that a little bit.
Well, I'm saying like 19th century. Oh, I received this 5-page FU from this philosopher who hates all of my work. Let me rebut every single one of your points in verse. I spend way too much time studying Reformation. You will find there will be an interview where that will be talked about a lot more in this series. I guarantee. But when you spend way too much time on certain eras that had a ton of letters, think Hamilton, then you really start to look at this going, you spent 5 days trying to think up the best way to say you suck.
Burn. It's an art form.
There is this semi-spoken, but not really, mention of interpretation that is the backbone of this entire anthology, of letting others interpret and find meaning in this work. But sometimes you also say screw it and you ask the creators, is there a particular thing that you want to bring out through the key or through COVID or through this murder hornets year.
Murder,
Is there-
that's a good phrase for it. Sarah, do you want to go first?
Let's see. I mean, some of what we talked about was like being able to be your own savior and you know, don't just blindly follow along with things that are normal. Like, you can step out, you can question things, you can find your own path. And if you want to open that door, go open the door. Like,
Be prepared for what's on the other side of the door. Life's scary that way, but
our actions. So, you know, do actions with intent, but like, yeah, don't stand up against oppression and all the things.
I mean, there is a thread of justice, I think, in this particular essay and this notion that we are responsible for if we want justice to exist in this world and for what has happened to us, we're responsible for creating it. And not in the vigilante kind of sense of things, but in the directly addressing what is wrong, not hiding from what is going on in the world, not letting
Don't
it
just push it under the rug.
Exactly. There is a responsibility in knowing what's going on. Even if you're going to go with the basic text, of Genesis and that very or the widely adopted text, with the idea that Eve ate the apple and ate the fruit. I think it's a pomegranate, quite frankly. That there is consequence nonetheless for every action, and it is not necessarily bad, but there is a facing of harshness that can come of this. And quite frankly, where our strength comes from in dealing with those situations is from each other and the communities that we build. I mean, but that's the way through any of these situations, or when there has been a grave injustice done, it's each other that we rely on. And we're the backbone and support for one another. Knowing gives us that responsibility. It's not just one of our responsibility, it's all of ours.
Yeah, and ignoring the injustices and not opening the door to them doesn't make them go away. And they'll just keep happening.
Absolutely. So now we have reached what I'm going to call the QVC portion of this interview. You guys, everyone who's watching this is absolutely amazing. We do want you to know that this is in part because of the anthology that you can get right now on Kickstarter. And you can get stories in Sarah's work. And on top of that, there's also 24 other creative team stories, really delving in. Story and Sarah have seen quite a few of them. I think they like them. But wait, there's also more.
You act now.
You act now in the next 30 days.
For only $99.99.
Sarah, would you like to talk about the second
Sure.
piece?
So some of you may have noticed that there's two copies of this painting behind me. This is the final painting, but this is the color study that I did before doing the painting. to make sure that it would work. This is apparently a normal thing that many artists do that I have been slacking off on. And so I wanted to make sure that I went ahead and did a full color study, smaller than the original, obviously. I didn't add any of the gold leaf, but for one of the tiers in the Kickstarter, you can opt to get the copy of the book and get my color study and a poem from Story.
Yay!
I
We're so
also
close
write
to them
poems.
together.
Yes.
And to be clear, we're not talking about a print of the color study. We are not talking about a reproduction. You will get that one. That one right there that Sarah is holding on to.
It's a stretched canvas. It doesn't have the edges painted, but you know, I'll have it varnished. I'll varnish it so it's nice and shiny.
It's pretty.
It is gorgeous. It is. You know what this reminds me of, Story and Sarah? It reminds me of Good Omens. Think about the first episode. Neil Gaiman got so much hate because remember, he had complete creative control, and Adam and Eve go out of the garden, and it's the first man and the first woman, and they're black, and suddenly you have a ton of certain kinds of religious people sending a lot of pointedly worded texts and emails to the Good Omens writer Neil Gaiman. How dare you be what's most likely anthropologically accurate?
It wasn't even a question when we were working on this project. It was like, obviously she's going to have a pomegranate. Obviously she's going to have an egg. Obviously there's going to be gold leaf. Obviously she's going to be black. Obviously she's going to be wearing royal purple.
These were just givens.
They were givens. I love that.
They were the axioms from which these paintings started.
I guess the pomegranate was maybe we weren't sure if it was going to be an apple or a pomegranate. So like, there were some decisions, obviously, but like the part where she was black was not a question. Yeah.
This has been wonderful. Do you have anything to add? Story definitely does.
Oh, yes. I also I wanted to add to the tiers. I have written many a thing and many short stories, and I have over the years had a fair number of them published. One of them was published in a magazine that started in the local area called Alliterate. The story is called When the Moon Fell into the Sea. It is about a world that is literally built on dragons and what happens when these dragons die and the rituals people build to deal with what might also be their own demise. It's one of the my things that I've of all of the things that I've gotten published, it's one of the ones that I'm still most proud of and most enamored of. I know oftentimes like you can have a piece of work that you're just like, you look back on it and you're like, I hate this now. This is still one that I'm like, I think I did okay.
Yay!
We are going to be, yes, it is the cat right here. Almost every live stream I've done, some sort of animal has shown up.
Well, I keep looking over her because she's been being cute on the chair over there. So she finally wandered over, and I knew that she needed to be snuggled. So, also my cats are just like really docile. So,
Sarah Morrison, professional cat snuggler.
Yeah.
The cat right there is like, I will kick you in the chin.
No, she's just bracing your paws there. She's chill right now. She's not trying to struggle away or anything.
So we have Sarah's original color study. We have more stories
From Story.
I give people hugs for puns on my name. If I haven't heard the pun before, that earns a hug, but it will have to be in post-COVID times.
It will definitely have to be in post-COVID times. I said this this morning on the launch stream of after COVID. I am going to find a way. I will find a convention where we can get as many people as possible, and we will be doing signing parties.
Yay!
Yes.
Like the closest thing we've had to signing parties was for Why Faith. We did Million Year Picnic. We had a few people drop by, and very much once again it was the you're really exuberant and you're explicitly not Christian. I'm going to talk with you. Well, I am not seeing any questions or comments. Where can people reach you on social media?
Story, do you have any social media?
I deleted my Facebook a few years ago in a fit of mental health housekeeping. I literally did this thing. I'm still on Twitter. I still answer people who poke at me. I'm not super active, but you will see me tweeting occasional bookseller stuff. And I am working on trying to put essays up once again, but inertia is inertia.
What's your
on my
Twitter
old
handle?
blog? At Story Boyle. I am just myself.
I have sarahmorrisonillustration.com. You can find me at Sarah Morrison Art on Instagram and Sarah Morrison Fantasy Illustration on Facebook.
And my website is storyboyle.com. I keep ancient essays there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for coming on and being the first ones in this marathon.
Kicking off the Kickstarter.
Exactly. We have 1,375 raised from 39 backers. It would be amazing if we could cruise past 15. We just hit 40 backers while I said that because I don't say anything at all the entire stream. The first time I start mentioning numbers, someone's like, "You're wrong."
I love it. I love it.
I love it. I want to say thank you to backer number 40. And thank you both for being a part of this.
Thanks for including us, even though we're not comic artists.
We have artist, writer, weird guy. That is what I was called on top of a mountain next to my future wife.
Embrace it.
And I quote, "Angus, please let go of that nice lady and that strange man's hand." So that was pretty much our first real date. So that is what I have become. With that, I am going to call this a very successful launch of these interviews. Thank you, everyone. Please back the Great Commandment anthology on Kickstarter. Make sure you're the one to get Sarah's original work, get Story's work, get mine, and have a wonderful, blessed evening. Thank you so much, and good night, everyone.